Hi, welcome to the Go Higher Frequency Astrology channel. My name is Suzanne. Join me as I investigate how the monthly cycles are progressing with a focus on how we can use this time more productively. Today, I'm going to be talking about the upcoming Mercury retrograde in Pisces, stationing on February the 26th. I'm going to be reviewing what this review cycle represents, but I'm also going to be reviewing the entire Mercury retrograde cycle in the water element this year and how you can best navigate this cycle depending on your own Mercury sign. I'll also be reviewing a couple of important charts that fit into this review cycle, specifically the Russia and Ukraine conflict and OpenAI. I'll leave timestamps in the description below in case you want to skip around to the topics that interest you the most. So we've finally cleared the official Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Aries, but we are still processing what has happened since 2015. It seems the zeitgeist is nostalgic for the year 2016 in particular, which makes sense when you understand we are in a nodal reversal of that time period. At the beginning of 2016, the South Node was at 22 degrees of Pisces, and Neptune had just left the 8th degree of Pisces. Now Mercury enters its first retrograde cycle of the year at 22 degrees of Pisces on February the 26th, retrograding back to that 8 degrees of Pisces on March 20th, the day of the Aries ingress. Mercury will review the Pisces degrees, beginning with the last line of gate 22, the gate of social openness. It will move back into gate 63, the gate of doubts, where it will finally meet the North Node in gate 37, the gate of friendship. When Trump was elected the first time, the North Node was in gate 40, where the South Node is right now, and Neptune was in gate 37, forming the channel of community, in the very same line the nodes are in now. And Neptune traveled through this Mercury retrograde path for the entirety of Trump's presidency. And now we're looking back at that time and having new clarity about what happened during that time period. We're nostalgic for the time period just prior. We want to go back to that time period because of the disillusionment that we're feeling with the time period that kicked off Trump's presidency. Neptune acts as a veil when it is moving through signs and degrees and gates. So when Neptune was transiting through these gates, there was a veil on what was happening. There was disinformation. Some of us, probably not people who watch this channel, had ideals of what Trump had promised them, and they wanted to go back to his presidency because they thought it was just the Democrats that barred him from achieving what he had promised them. But now they're having new insights into what was promised versus what he's delivering. Saturn and Neptune have met up in this gate 25 now in Aries. And now that Saturn and Neptune have left Pisces, there's new clarity. There's new disillusionment about what's promised versus what's been delivered. The Mercury retrograde cycle will be in all water signs this year. Mercury typically follows a specific elemental triplicity each year, eventually tracing a 6-pointed star around the zodiac. So let's retrace this water triplicity together. So after this Pisces retrograde on June the 29th, Mercury will go retrograde at the 26th degree of Cancer, and it will station direct at the 16th degree of Cancer. So it's really retracing Jupiter's transit through Cancer. And what happened during that time period, it's reviewing all of the themes around our beliefs and our empathy for others, and what happens in elite circles versus what happens to the common man. So we're reviewing that during this time, and it stations direct on July the 23rd. So Mercury will be retrograde in the solar return of the United States. If you remember, if you watched my 2026 review, I spoke about the solar return of the United States. I'm going to play you a clip from that video now. Note that the Sibley chart is on the outer wheel of the solar return chart, and the solar return chart features a Mercury retrograde at 25 degrees of Cancer. So the United States will be experiencing a Mercury return around this time. And Trump's Venus-Saturn conjunction happens to conjunct the Mercury of the United States. And you see that he's been trying to restrict the media and free speech in his second term. I won't speak in any detail of this chart, but suffice it to say it will be a difficult year with the ascendant-descendant flipped, Saturn applying to an opposition to Saturn, and Pluto applying to a conjunction with the South Node. Saturn will go retrograde in late July and will not perfect its opposition until March of 2027, when Pluto will also conjunct the South Node. The last time the country experienced a Saturn opposition, Clinton was impeached for his inappropriate sexual relationship with Monica Lewinsky. And you see that Clinton is in the news once again for this kind of behavior. And finally, on October the 24th, right before the midterms, Mercury will station retrograde at 20 degrees of Scorpio, and it will turn direct at 5 degrees of Scorpio on November the 13th. Now, of special note, Venus will station retrograde at the 8th degree of Scorpio on October the 3rd. And it is a special Venus retrograde because it's the final Venus star point in Scorpio. And that began in 1926. It started to shift into Libra in 2022 and fully transitions into Libra after this retrograde cycle. Now that means that both Venus and Mercury will be retrograde for the midterms. Venus will have moved back into Libra by this time, while Mercury will still be in Scorpio, and it's conjunct the sun here. So with both planets retrograde, I'm sorry to report that what we're already predicting is sure to play out with delays or some kind of contested results. And you see in this chart, we have the South Node, which will be right on the president's Mars degree, and Jupiter and Mars will be right here on the South Node. And this is a noon chart. The moon will definitely be in Virgo when the results start coming in. And you see that it's square Uranus right here. So there will definitely be a lot of tension at the polling centers. There will be a lot of aggressiveness that's happening on this day, but I'm not really going to do any predictions. It's a very interesting chart, but we'll see what happens. So I want to quote a passage from this great book that was recommended to me by my very first astrology teacher, Astro Butterfly. She had a Chiron course that hooked me into astrology when I started this journey right after my Uranus opposition. And it's a book that is called Hermetica Triptica. It's by Gary P. Caton, and he is actually doing Astrology Hub this year. I recognized that name once I pulled out this book. I didn't know him before, and I saw that he was a featured astrologer in Astrology Hub, so you might want to check him out. It's a great book, though, and I wanted to quote what he says about Mercury in water years. It's a great quote. He says, during water years, we need to learn to become malleable and flow with life, absorbing the universal messages around us and allowing them to resolve any rigidity in our lives. Water years are great for quiet, inner, and preparatory work, creating new channels for emotional expression or attunement with the unconscious, and for adjusting our feeling values and assessing our state of emotional happiness and contentment with our lives. The Mercury retrograde cycle in the water element may help ease us into this new fire and air cycle, cooling the atmosphere when it gets overheated and our nerves become over electrified. He goes on to suggest that those of us who share a Mercury in the air signs, Gemini, Libra, or Aquarius, I have my Mercury in Aquarius, will need to slow down, practicing the Taoist state of wu-wei, or action in non-action. And this aligns very well to the hope motivation, which I have in human design. I have the motivation hope. And it describes somebody knowing internally what's coming and preparing for it. Action in non-action. And I've found myself doing that a lot throughout my life, even if I've been frustrated by those transition periods. I have been preparing for something that I didn't know was coming, and I just sensed something was coming. That's happened to me right before COVID. That's the example that I'll share. I had this deep yearning to do something different. And I felt trapped in my life. It was right before my Uranus opposition. So that had something to do with it. But I felt trapped in my life in New York City. I was a marketer at tech companies, and I had just had a couple of really very tough marketing positions, one in virtual reality and one, funny enough, in this AI way back before we started to talk about it more seriously. But I really wanted a way out. And so I found myself leaving New York City. And what happened afterwards was such a great preparation for COVID. I didn't know COVID was coming, but something inside of me needed something different and knew that I was headed toward something that was unsustainable. I was drinking too much and I was miserable and I needed a change of atmosphere. And so right before COVID, about 6 months, I quit drinking. So I had a really great start before COVID. I started spiritual practice and I quit drinking. It really prepared me for that time period. And ever since, I've been preparing for this time period. Even though I didn't really know what I was preparing for. Again, I love astrology, but astrology has really helped me through this time period of transition because it's helped me prepare for what's coming by analyzing the cycles more in depth in this year, as I'm doing with you now. So that's a little bit like what we're practicing this year. We have to kind of have faith that everything is going to work out, trusting our inner knowing to know that we're preparing for something that will help us in the future. For those with Mercury in earth signs, Taurus, Virgo, or Capricorn, you will need to put aside your natural skepticism and detachment, relaxing your critical faculties. I know this is going to be hard for our earth signs, but allow yourself to feel the connections between all things without it having to make rational sense, because it's going to do you no good to try to figure out what's rational during this time period, because it's not going to be rational. And you might as well just feel into the moment and practice feeling into the moment. But, it's in a trine relationship to Earth. So it can be easy flowing, I think, as long as you open yourself up to a new way of understanding. And for those with Mercury in a fire sign, Aries, Leo, or Sagittarius, water is your natural opposite. So this transition will be a bit difficult for you, but ultimately fire forms new lands in the ocean of water. So again, there's a certain amount of faith that whatever struggles that we're going through this year will work out for the best. And the best may not be what we expect at all, but it will bring us into a new moment. And in that moment, we adapt to it. Now, if you have Mercury in a water sign, Cancer, Scorpio, or Pisces, then this is your elemental return year. And in this book, Gary has delineated the 12 elemental return years. So check out his book if you want a more detailed description of what your elemental return means for you. So we've already established 2015 and 2016 as a key time period for this upcoming review, with 2022 as an important shift in the Venus star point cycle. Now, the United States was experiencing its Neptune opposition in the latter parts of 2021, and Neptune had made its final opposition on March 1st of 2022. So you see Neptune is at 22 degrees of Pisces, and it's opposing the Sibley Neptune at 22 degrees of Virgo. So it was moving from that last degree of gate 22, line 6, the gate of social openness, to gate 36, the gate of crisis shortly after. And what was the crisis? Well, just days prior, Russia had invaded Ukraine, effectively ending the Cold War. Now, one could argue that the seeds of this invasion started in 2014 with the annexation of Crimea. And there were key developments in both Ukraine's response and Russia's integration of Crimea in 2015 and 2016, that time period that we were just talking about. And at the same time, Jupiter and Neptune started a new cycle at 23 degrees of Pisces in April 2022. The United States was experiencing inflation the entirety of 2021, and this was in response to the COVID years. But it became significantly worse during this conjunction. As soon as Russia invaded Ukraine, it was at its peak the month after the conjunction in June 2022. So along with inflation, Reinhold Eberstein describes Jupiter and Neptune in its positive expression as a pursuit of idealistic inclinations, a tendency to speculate and gain without effort. Its negative expression can lead to poor speculation, scandal, and losses in political conflicts. Like the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction suggests, this invasion had to do with idealism about the ownership of Ukraine. You see Mercury conjunct Saturn here. Very rigid belief that Ukraine belongs to Russia, because in the last Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Capricorn, that's when the Berlin Wall fell and Russia lost a lot of its territory. And so they had idealistic expectations that they were going to capture Ukraine again and integrate it back into Russia. And you see that the Saturn Mercury is in square to Uranus in Taurus. This disagreement about territory and land. OpenAI is another example in the spotlight right now. The company was founded in November 2015, and ChatGPT launched in November of 2022. And the public launch definitely started with a scandal, as the board fired the company's CEO, Sam Altman, right after the ChatGPT announcement. The board fired him because they said they could not trust him, insinuating that he was misleading people. But this quickly backfired, as the promise of what Sam Altman released was too important to the tech world to be squandered. So during this time, when we were experiencing the high inflation and the Uranus square Saturn, businesses and the tech world were feeling the tightening and were looking for ways out to innovate out of where they felt like they were stuck. There was starting to be less money invested in startups, and they felt like they were no longer coming up with these big hits, like the social media companies that had those big hits as soon as Neptune went into Pisces, and they were looking for something new. And what happened was that, like I said, I was marketing AI way back in 2015 and 2016, basically, but it really was basically programmatic LLMs is what they call it. It's just models. They created models. But what Sam Altman did was he had a breakthrough, or the company experienced a breakthrough where they were able to basically put on the face of these models a simple communication interface, which allowed normal people like me to interact with the output of those models. But the technology on the back end was pretty much the same. And I think people became nervous that he was starting to talk about how this innovation was much further than where it had been during that time period. They basically had opened up the models to the entire internet. And so they had a real great bulk of information behind the models. So they were able to basically deliver the output of people's questions in a way that made people think that the models were more intelligence. They were more advanced than they actually were. They promised like this artificial general intelligence if they just were able to create bigger and bigger data sets. Eventually the models would retrain themselves and we would have this artificial general intelligence. But a lot of developers who really understand the technology really don't think that the way that the models are set up currently will ever get to artificial general intelligence. I'm going to play you a clip of one such developer sounding off on this AI technology. His name is David Magerman. He helped found the equities trading group at Renaissance in 1995, joining the group in its earliest days, playing a lead role in designing and building the trading simulation and estimation software. I mentioned in my solar eclipse video that the equities markets have been using LLMs for stock trades for a while now. This entire interview is amazing. I'll link all the clips in this video below in case you want to check them out.
And the one thing that when I was studying for my PhD thesis, for my PhD, and you have to study the history of the field, I learned about the history of AI and computer science, and it is littered with overpromising and underdelivering. Going back to Eliza, the chatbot in the 60s, where people thought, wow, this is like an intelligent agent. This is like artificial, this is real AGI. You can talk to it and it'll give you counseling advice. And it was not that. And people eventually realized the demo was just canned and it was just a toy.
But like what happens in a lot of technology breakthroughs, sometimes you have to fake it till you make it. You fake it, you have a crash, and then what's learned during the innovative period leads to some breakthrough that makes the promise kind of true. So a lot of people in the tech world saw this as an opportunity to experiment and to become this next big company like, Google had become or Facebook had become. If they captured the market share very early, they could be that company that develops this more advanced AGI that they are all promising. So this AI modeling that they have developed is much better when you have something specific that you're focusing on. And I'm going to play this funny clip because it really explains this very well.
AI systems have narrow intelligence, which means they're great at simple tasks, but when it comes to complex actions in the real world, holy shit, its f***ing head fell off. But these AI companies are betting billions that their systems will improve to be as capable as a human at most tasks. also known as AGI.
And so that's why the AI agents that they've developed show much more promise.
But as billions pour into AI, some pundits are starting to use the B word.
We are in a bubble.
We're in a bubble of some sort that will pop at some time.
Or are we in an AI bubble?
Of course.
That prepubescent old man is wrong. It's not a bubble. All that's happening is the three biggest players in the AI world have created a circular flow of deals worth billions. NVIDIA invests in OpenAI, who turns around and invests in cloud computing from Oracle, who then reaches around to NVIDIA to buy chips. These contracts jack up their stock prices and, oh wait, now I see it.
So this is the most expensive circle jerk of all time.
That's also why the market started to waver, because they saw that, oh, it's the agents that will kill other businesses off. And so we'll have concentrated monopolies, basically, and the other companies will be killed off. But at what cost? And so the market is starting to cool, and people are starting to recognize that there might be a crash at some point. That doesn't mean that it won't lead into something better if we don't destroy the world first. But that's, the promise at the end of the day. And this chart just tells that story so well, with its moon and Neptune and Jupiter all up here in the 10th house. And it's creating a T-score with Mars and Venus and Mercury. They're trying to raise another huge round, which will evaluate the company at this crazy valuation. The North Node is right up here on the midheaven, and the eclipse will be right on the founding's moon. There's a lot more I could talk about with this chart, but I'm going to leave it for now.